Isaiah chapter 54 is a very significant chapter for the generation that the Lord returns for the people of God. And in this chapter, he's describing Israel as a barren woman who has these incredible promises of a great revival and the glory of God, but she's coming up short and she seems to have none of those things happening, and she's distraught and she's confused. And then the prophet Isaiah tells her how to respond to the Lord. He says, barren widow Israel, God has great promises for you. Now, these same realities are for the body of Christ. That in our own lives, when we feel barren or we feel like there's an element of barrenness in parts of the church. And he gives some real specific directions in Isaiah 54 on how we're supposed to respond and what we're supposed to do in our relationship with the Lord in the time of barrenness, and what we should be telling the nation of Israel as friends of Israel, supporting of Israel when they face that barrenness. Now, the thing that makes Isaiah 54 really interesting, and Isaiah 55 as well, is that verses 4 to 6 of Isaiah 54, the Lord explains this complicated human dynamic of pain that Israel was in, that she felt forsaken, grieved. She felt a bit cynical with God. She felt left out. The promises were not happening. Nations were standing against her, and her heart was really hurting, and she was in great anguish in her heart. And the Lord shows the body of Christ how to answer Israel in that pain. But it's the same answer that we give to one another in emotional pain. And so the complications of that emotional dynamic is laid out also in Isaiah chapter 54. It's a fascinating chapter. So it's, what do we say to people that are in this emotional despondency and heaviness and bruising emotionally? And how do we get out of it in our own personal lives with one another, but how we message this to the nation of Israel in the generation the Lord returns. Fascinating chapter, Isaiah 54 and 55.